Deep in the Canadian wilderness, a machine so powerful it could fell a tree, strip every limb, cut it to length, and stack it, all by itself, was quietly buried in the ground where it broke down for the last time. Engineers spent 6 full years building it. Logging companies spent fortunes running it. Then it vanished without a trace. This wasn't an accident. 10 machines were built to dominate the forest, and the forest won. Number 1. The Timberjack 240 Grapple Skidder. The moment rubber tires truly took over the forest, this was the machine leading the charge. The Timberjack 240 wasn't just another skidder. It was one of the first machines that proved logging could be faster, cheaper, and far more efficient without cables, railroads, or massive crews. Built in the 1960s, this articulated grapple skidder could drive directly into the forest, grab multiple logs at once, and haul them out in a single trip. No chokers, no rigging, no waiting. For the first time, the forest didn't need infrastructure. The machine became the system. Operators loved it because it was simple, rugged, and brutally effective. It could navigate tight spaces, rough terrain, and muddy ground without needing the massive support systems older machines required. Logging companies loved it because it cut labor costs dramatically, fewer workers, more production. But the Timberjack 240 also quietly ended an entire era. Cable logging systems that had dominated for decades suddenly looked slow and expensive. Steam machines disappeared. Entire skill sets, choker setters, rigging crews began to fade away. The Timberjack didn't just replace machines, it replaced people. And like many pioneers, the 240 didn't last forever. Newer, more powerful skidders with enclosed cabs, better hydraulics, and improved safety features quickly took its place. Today, the Timberjack name itself is gone, absorbed into John Deere, and the early machines that changed everything are mostly rusting in forgotten yards. This is the second lesson of logging history. The machines that change everything are usually the first to be replaced. Number 2. The Caterpillar 518 Grapple Skidder. When Caterpillar entered the skidder game, they didn't just compete, they dominated. The Caterpillar 518 Grapple Skidder became one of the most recognizable logging machines in North America during the 1970s and 1980s. Built with Caterpillar's reputation for durability, this machine was designed to survive conditions that would destroy lesser equipment, deep mud, steep slopes, and brutal non-stop workloads. Unlike earlier experimental skidders, the 518 was refined. It had power, balance, and reliability. Its grapple system allowed operators to grab and move large bundles of logs without ever leaving the cab, dramatically increasing productivity while reducing risk. And that cab mattered. For decades, logging had been one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. The 518 helped shift the operator from being in the danger to being protected from it. It wasn't perfect. Early machines were still rough, loud, and unforgiving, but it marked a turning point towards safer forestry equipment. But even legends fade. By the 1990s, newer machines with advanced hydraulics, better ergonomics, and more efficient fuel systems began replacing the 518. Environmental regulations also started changing how logging was done, forcing machines to adapt or disappear. The Caterpillar 518 didn't fail. It was simply overtaken by progress. Because in logging, survival isn't about being strong, it's about evolving faster than the forest industry itself. Number 3. The Caterpillar D4 Logging Winch. Few machines in this list had a stranger second life than the Caterpillar D4. Originally built as a general-purpose crawler tractor, the D4 was pressed into logging service in a way that nobody at Caterpillar had probably imagined. Loggers stripped off the wheels, removed the seat, attached wooden skids to the front, and converted the machine into a stationary logging winch, powered from the tractor's engine but no longer moving anywhere on its own. This improvised transformation tells you everything about the logging industry of the early 90s. There weren't enough purpose-built logging machines, so loggers did what loggers always did. They adapted whatever they had. The D4 as a winch could drag enormous loads of timber, its crawler engine providing far more torque than any draft animal. A single man operating the winch could replace an entire team of horses and their handlers. But the D4 winch was a stopgap, not a solution. John Deere had just released its MC crawler, a machine earning high praise from loggers for its ability to handle steep slopes and soft soil. The MC crawler moved. It could follow the timber. By the mid-1950s, machines that could actually travel through the forest were making the stripped-down D4 winch look absurd. The improvisation was brilliant for its moment, but moments pass. The D4 in its winch form quietly disappeared, replaced by the very concept it had helped prove that a machine needed to go to the timber, not wait for it. Number 4. The Wagner articulated rubber-tired skidder. In the mid-1950s, the Wagner brothers of Portland, Oregon, built something the logging industry wasn't fully ready to understand. They engineered one of the first rubber-tired skidders in North America, and not just any rubber-tired skidder, but one with an articulated design that bent in the middle to steer. This bends-in-the-middle approach, where the machine's front half and rear half pivot around a central point, would eventually become the universal standard for heavy forestry equipment. Wagner is generally credited with perfecting this articulated design for heavy equipment. But in the mid-1950s, the logging world was still primarily a world of crawler tractors, horses, and cable systems. Rubber tires in a forest. Many loggers were skeptical. The machines were prototypes, experimental, not widely produced. Venata Brothers, a logging company in Oregon, actually acquired and used 2 of these early Wagner skidders for years, and their records note that the 2 machines were quite different from each other, highlighting just how experimental the whole enterprise was. Wagner never became a dominant force in logging equipment. The company eventually split and evolved into different enterprises: FWD Wagner, Scoop Mobile, and Wagner Mining Scoop. The articulated skidder concept they pioneered was picked up and commercialized by others. Timberjack was founded in Woodstock, Ontario in the 1950s, specifically to build articulated four-wheel drive tractors with winches at the back, directly developing the concept Wagner had sketched out. The irony of the logging world: the inventors of one of its most fundamental technologies were largely forgotten while their idea lived forever. Number 5. The first Timberjack skidder. In the 1950s, 2 men, Wes McGill and Robert Simmons, founded Timberjack in Woodstock, Ontario. Their mission was simple: build an articulated four-wheel drive tractor with a winch at the back, specifically designed for pulling logs out of the forest. They built a prototype, and production took off from there. The Timberjack 200 series arrived in the early 1960s, powered by a 61-horsepower Ford gasoline engine, with a suggested list price of $8,925. The first Timberjack that anyone could buy commercially was a landmark machine, the first articulated skidder to formally bear the Timberjack name. But it also had serious flaws. The early loggers who drove these machines into the field remember them with mixed emotions. The manual transmission was primitive. The braking system on early models was barely adequate, just a band brake on the transfer case, more like a parking brake than an actual stopping system. For a machine dragging thousands of pounds of timber down a forested slope, that was a problem. The Timberjack name would eventually grow into a global giant, later acquired by Eaton Corporation, then becoming independent, then being absorbed into the Rama-Repola Forest Machine Group, and finally purchased by John Deere in 2000 for hundreds of millions of dollars, only for John Deere to formally discontinue the Timberjack brand in 2006. The original 200 series machines, those early rattling gas-powered skidders with their borrowed transmissions and inadequate brakes, are entirely gone. They were the seed of an empire that eventually swallowed them whole. Number 6. The John Deere MC Crawler. When John Deere released the MC Crawler in the early 1950s, loggers across North America took notice. The MC earned exceptional marks for its ability to handle what broke other machines: steep slopes and soft, waterlogged soil that would swallow a lesser crawler whole. In an era when most logging was still happening on the flanks of mountains and in rain-soaked Pacific Northwest forests, a machine that wouldn't sink, slide, or stall was genuinely worth its weight in gold. The MC Crawler was a purebred track machine. No rubber tires, no articulation, just steel tracks digging into earth that would stop anything else. It opened logging on terrain that had previously required horses or cable systems with spar trees and complicated rigging. For loggers who were accustomed to losing machines to bog holes and mud pits, the MC felt like a miracle. But track machines have an inherent disadvantage over rubber tires on any terrain that isn't genuinely extreme. They're slower, they're harder to maneuver, they pack down and damage the forest floor more severely. And crucially, as logging roads improved through the late 1950s and 1960s, the terrain that justified a crawler became smaller and smaller. John Deere itself would introduce the 440 crawler in the late 1950s, and then in 1965 the game-changing 440 skidder, a wheeled machine that finally brought operator comfort and safety into the equation. The MC crawler's moment lasted roughly a decade before the rubber tire made it largely obsolete in standard logging operations. Number 7. The Beloit tree harvesters. This is where the list takes a genuinely shocking turn. The Beloit tree harvester, built in Minnesota by designer Bob Larson in the early 1960s, was not simply a machine. It was an entire logging operation compressed into one moving platform. Here is what this machine could actually do, because even today, it sounds like science fiction. The Beloit harvester would approach a standing tree, attach itself to the trunk, and then use a multi-section articulating boom to strip every limb from the tree while it was still standing. Then it would lop off the top. Then it would shear the tree at the base. Then it would stack the full-length tree in a bunch alongside other processed trees ready for forwarding. Delimbing, topping, felling, stacking. One machine, one pass. This wasn't a concept. Photographs exist of the Beloit harvester working in the forest in 1964, and a surviving unit sits today at Collier Memorial State Park near Klamath Falls, Oregon. A companion grapple skidder and log loader were also built by Beloit to create a complete three-machine mechanical logging system. It was, according to those who've studied it, way too advanced for its time, and that was exactly its problem. The hydraulic systems of the early 1960s weren't reliable enough to power a machine of this complexity through thousands of hours of brutal forestry work. Maintenance was a nightmare. The logging industry of 1964 didn't have mechanics trained to keep a machine like this running. One logger's family, the Tompkinses of Highland Pulp in Cape Breton, ran a Beloit harvester as early as 1965, and even they eventually moved on. The Beloit harvester was a vision of 1990s technology delivered in 1963, and the world simply wasn't ready to maintain it. Number 8. The Koehring shortwood harvesters. If the Beloit harvester was ahead of its time, the Koehring shortwood harvester was its even more ambitious successor, and its story is simultaneously the most impressive and most tragic on this list. Built by Koehring Waterous, headquartered in Brantford, Ontario, the Koehring shortwood harvester took 6 years to develop. 6 years of engineering, testing, rebuilding, and refining. The result was a machine so technologically advanced that researchers at Canada's Forest Engineering Research Institute formally described it as by far the most technologically advanced and complicated machine of the day. Here is what it could do: fell trees, strip every limb, remove the top, cut the log into specific lengths called bolts, collect those bolts in an onboard carrier, transport them to a roadside, and then unload them directly onto waiting trailers or onto the ground. From standing tree to roadside pile, one machine, zero manual labor required at any step. Approximately 170 to 175 units were built between roughly 1969 and 1975. Donald Tompkins of Highland Pulp purchased one in 1970 and ran it until 1989, nearly 2 decades of operation, which speaks to both the machine's capability and its users' determination to keep it alive. But the machines were notoriously heavy, creating devastating ruts in forest soil. They needed flat ground and a dense road network to function efficiently. Multiple formal evaluations were conducted through the 1970s, and while performance was acknowledged, reliability was a constant battle. Koehring Waterous was eventually purchased by Timberjack around 19. The Koehring forestry machine line continued production until approximately 19, and then the company was closed. In one of the most heartbreaking acts of industrial amnesia in logging history, when John Deere later acquired Timberjack, all of the Koehring engineering files were sent to the dump. Decades of design knowledge, test data, and innovation destroyed. Most of the machines were scrapped or buried on site. One surviving Koehring shortwood harvester sits in a forestry museum in Boyerstown, New Brunswick, as a monument to a machine that was simply too complex for its era to sustain. Number 9. The Madill 071 yarder. If you want to understand raw power in the forest, you don't look at wheels, you look at cables. The Madill 071 yarder was one of the most iconic cable logging machines ever built, dominating the steep, unforgiving terrain of the Pacific Northwest. In places where wheeled machines simply couldn't operate, cliffs, deep valleys, unstable ground, the Madill didn't drive into the forest. It reached into it. Using massive steel cables stretched across entire hillsides, the 071 could drag logs from impossible distances, lifting and pulling timber across terrain that no skidder could survive. Entire slopes could be harvested without a single machine touching the ground below. This wasn't just logging, it was engineering on a landscape scale. But even the Madill had limits. Cable logging required massive setup time, skilled crews, and complex rigging systems. As road networks improved and more advanced ground-based machines were developed, the economics began to shift. Why spend hours rigging cables when a machine could simply drive in and haul logs out? The Madill 071 didn't disappear completely. Cable yarding is still used today in extreme terrain, but its dominance faded. What was once the backbone of logging became a specialized solution. The forest didn't defeat the yarder, efficiency did. Number 10. The Hydroax feller buncher. By the late 1960s and into the 1970s, the feller buncher had emerged as a revolutionary concept, a self-propelled machine that could grab a tree with a cutting head, sever it at the base with either a chainsaw, circular saw, or hydraulic shear, and then carry it to a pile before repeating the process. Hydroax was among the early manufacturers of this technology, and for a period, they were one of the names that dominated the feller buncher market. The Hydroax machines represented a genuine leap forward, faster, safer, and less labor-intensive than any manual felling operation. Other manufacturers of the era included Allied, Barco, Liebherr, Fabtech, Koehring, International Harvester, Case, Hi-Tech, Franklin, Tree Farmer, and Timco. For a brief moment in the 1970s and early 1980s, the feller buncher market was one of the most hotly contested equipment sectors in North America. Then the consolidation began. Hi-Tech capsized entirely. Koehring was acquired by Timberjack. Blount eventually bought Fabtech and rebranded both the Fabtech line and Hydroax as Prentice. Allied and Liebherr withdrew from the market completely. International Harvester and Case exited Forestry. The machines weren't gone. The Prentice brand carried on the Hydroax lineage, but the original Hydroax identity was erased. In the early 1980s, Bell Equipment of South Africa partnered with Morbark to introduce a three-wheeled feller buncher to the American market. The design had a brief run of popularity, and then even that faded. Valmet was the last manufacturer offering a three-wheeled feller buncher, stopping production in late 2007. The feller buncher market of the 1970s was a Cambrian explosion of designs, brands, and engineering philosophies. And like every Cambrian explosion, most of the creatures that emerged didn't survive. If you found this history as fascinating as we did, hit that subscribe button. There are dozens more machines like these buried in the archives of logging history, and we're just getting started.